This was a good year for blackberries. Autumn along the bottom edge of Puget Sound was beautiful. Their place was at the end of the salt marshes outside of Olympia. Tom got the car out of the garage they'd added after the last flood made them rebuild everything. In the old days, they were told, there had been a bait shop on their property and an unofficial park where children fished. Tom had on a clean white shirt and one of his two sports coats, neither of which he wore much anymore. Jack stood outside the front door, gripping a paper bag with things he'd want if they made him spend the night. Tom pulled the car up, opened the driver's door, and extended his legs to retie the laces of his right shoe. My turn this time. I'll drive. Look, son, our lucky day. Jack got in. He didn't say anything. We could have put this off, but what would be the point? It's a good day for a drive. We've got nothing planned. I can stay in Seattle if that's what they say to do. Put your seatbelt on. Tom was taking Jack to the hospital in Seattle. Their street was wet after last night's rain, and the potholes seemed worse. Jack stared ahead while Tom occasionally took his eyes off the road to glance his way. They crossed two big hills to get to I-5. Tom slowed down when their car needed to squeeze right to make room for a school bus coming the other way. "Thanks," mumbled Tom under his breath when the bus moved over as well. "Are we almost there?" Jack asked. They passed a minivan coming the other way. "Are we almost there?" Jack asked a second time. Tom mumbled thanks to the minivan. It took a while to get to I-5. They ran under the shoulder several times to make room for oncoming vehicles. Tom always mumbled thanks, and Jack never got an answer to his question. Tom sat straight as a tree in his seat, and now it was Jack who stared ahead. "Thanks. Are we almost there?" Clouds covered the sun. Tom checked that his headlights were on. "Thanks." Tom was a more careful driver than Jack. He'd never had an accident, not even when they'd done this drive in the middle of the night. Both terrified, and Tom nearly faint with panic. As they eased onto the ramp headed north, Jack's legs started to tremble. He placed his left hand on Tom's right thigh. "Are we almost there?" Tom slept that night on a sofa in the waiting room. Jack had forgotten his paper bag in the car and hadn't asked for it. They released him around noon the next day. "I'm driving him home. Thanks for everything." Tom got the car out of the parking garage and pulled up to the sliding glass doors. He threw Jack's paper bag into the back. A male nurse helped Jack out of the wheelchair and into the passenger's seat. "Thanks. I'm driving us home now." When the weather was better, Tom told himself, they'd come back to Seattle and have fun like they used to. Jack looked out his window as they drove to I-5. Tom reached over with his hand and placed it on Jack's thigh. "Are we almost there?" Jack asked. A truck moved into the center lane to let their car merge into highway traffic headed south. "Thanks." Two motorcyclists waved them by. "Thanks." A state trooper's arm signaled them into the far left lane to avoid the accident ahead. "Thanks." "Are we almost there?" Past SeaTac, a flatbed trailer got into the climbing lane. "Thanks." Tom was as grateful to the drivers as he was the doctors. After Tacoma, the sun came out and lit the pine trees on both sides of the highway. "Are we almost there?" They were almost there when Tom exited at Olympia and started down the long street with the many potholes. Yes. This was a good year for blackberries. After he put Jack to bed, Tom thought he would go out and gather some. Autumn along the bottom edge of Puget Sound was beautiful.